Hello and welcome to the Southbound Sports Show. I'm your host, Richie Leahy, here with my co-host, Maddie B. I didn't even really open up the board, update our board here for the video. I forgot to do it. But it's kind of the same thing besides the World Cup, which we're going to talk about. But the USA is out of it, so we're going to start with some NFL. Tom Brady passed up Peyton Manning. Actually, let me bring up the slide. Tom Brady passed up Peyton Manning last night for the most comeback victories in NFL history, which I thought, oh, this would be like a graphic that like I can show on the show. But no, the regular season list was so long that it was insane. And I thought, I don't remember like Peyton Manning being behind that many times for like him to be tied with Tom Brady, let alone I knew like New England always struggled with like, hey, we don't have any offense. So, like, Tom Brady needs to come out and, like, hit a game-winning, like, drive. But Peyton Manning had a good bit of list, too. So, I only showed Tom Brady's, like, postseason victories. But I watched the game against New Orleans, and they usually struggle with them, the Saints, for some reason. He drives back. They throw the touchdown, and they throw a flag. And I thought, Tom Brady's going to lose this game and really put the playoff in jeopardy for this season. And then you have to wonder if you're him, like, what did I come back for? A losing season? But instead, the holding penalty doesn't even matter. He comes back, throws a touchdown with 3 seconds left in the game, which is the closest like game-winning drive he's had to the end of the game in his career. So something that they did, I don't know if you saw the game, but they were tracking like his velocity, his arm velocity, and they said that he was throwing it faster speeds and more accurately than a lot of the younger quarterbacks. Like I think they said he would have been like top 3, which is insane because he's like 45 years old. So like, how do you even think that he would retire at the end of the season? Because I thought at a certain point, you watch the beginning of the game, he like comes out all rusty. He's throwing balls in the dirt, overthrowing guys, and then he zeroes in and like just starts clicking. I don't know if he's trying to like reserve some of his power until later in the game, so he's kind of just like aiming throws. I don't know, but whatever he's doing, I think Steve Young was the guy that presented it because he like was kind of talking about how he had to retire because of his body breaking down, and yet Tom Brady's out here not even showing any signs of a slowdown, which is insane to me.
But I think the big difference is Steve Young was doing so much scrambling too and taking extra hits and wear and tear, where a lot of Brady's throws, and this is to his credit, are really fast throws. Like he's getting the ball and the defense really doesn't have time to really hit him because it's like catch fire. And he's throwing the ball so quick, so short. It's like the times that he really gets himself in trouble are the times that he's throwing those deep down the field throws. Those are the ones that always end up like costing him. Because I think he's losing. He didn't have a rocket arm to begin with, and I think like he's getting older. That velocity is going to be on deeper throws affected.
Well, I think the quickness is something that puts in a weird position going forward for the NFL. Like, I don't think anyone's going to touch his records because a lot of the quarterbacks coming in that are younger are known for scrambling around. Like, even like Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes, guys that are known for like putting up these big passing numbers, they're running the ball a lot. So like Tom Brady doesn't do that. Peyton Manning didn't do that. So for guys to have high passing and just long careers, it seems like I would be very surprised if any of the quarterbacks coming into the league now are playing into their 40s. Yeah, I know you can avoid hits when you're running around, but I think losing that element as you get older and being just half a step slower every year or so is going to take its toll. And you're either going to have to adapt and kind of just become that statuesque, like let's just throw the ball quick and try to avoid big hits. But it only takes one bad hit to break your finger, like Aaron Rodgers is battling. And then what are you going to do? At some point, like Ben Roethlisberger was able to take the hits, and even Russell Wilson, to my point, like I always bring it up, it seems like no one in the NFL realized like Russell Wilson every year was losing it throughout the season. And it was kind of an age thing. He was running around taking hits for how many years, even though he didn't like run the ball. When you're scrambling outside the pocket, you leave yourself open to take hits. And I think it wears you down. I think that's what Tom Brady, his sticking point is that he really doesn't do that. I don't really know any other quarterbacks coming into the league that don't do that either. They all kind of have some type of running element just because of how college has shifted towards that. Even like Joe Burrow, coming from like LSU running, it's more of like a pro system. He was still running the ball, you know. What are you going to do? You're going to take some hits? I don't think we see another Tom Brady in our lifetime. Other NFL things. My fantasy, man, it is going to be a crazy week. We're in the final week of the regular season. And I'm in a 3-way tie for first place right now, I think. And total points for the year, I think I'm in first. So if I'm able to win, I should win the regular season championship. But I'm playing the guy that I think is in second or third right now. Like it's really tight. I can't remember. I think there's only 1 point separating the next two guys. So if I lose to them and the other two guys both win, it's going to come down to whoever scores more points this week, I think. So it's crazy. The playoff position for our league is kind of set, though. So you have like the top 8 guys. I don't even think it's close to switching spots, which is insane to me. But you never know, like with how fantasy goes. One guy gets injured, someone doesn't play. But the Titans, man, they've been struggling. Deshaun Watson coming back, I knew not to play him. But, man, not putting up any stats at all going forward. Like, I don't know how many weeks it's going to take for him to not beat Rusty. And do you think the Browns' defense and special teams can keep scoring for him until he gets caught up for playoffs?
I don't know, but I was disappointed because Chubb did nothing.
The whole offense did nothing. My boy, Peoples-Jones, man.
He was my bell cow, and now he's just grinding to a halt when I need him to pick it up.
My man, Peoples-Jones, returned that punt or kick, whichever one he returned. He got the touchdown, got the ball rolling. I thought, is that a long touchdown pass? Like, nah. Of course not. Deshaun Watson, he only throws like an interception and had like a handful of yards. I think he had like 6 points or something total. So that's the one team. It's like now you're in the point where who's making a push? Because they showed a playoff like picture for the NFL, and I tried to bring it up. I couldn't really find it before the show. But I was like wondering, you have guys like the 49ers, which a week ago everyone said they were going to be the favorites for the Super Bowl. Jimmy G, broke his ankle almost immediately in the game. They still won, I think.
Yeah.
And then there are rumors like, hey, could they pick up Baker Mayfield? Which to me would have been funny because I've been saying about, I think Baker's in a bad situation. He goes to Carolina. They fired their coach mid-season. And, of course, he's struggling because who isn't struggling for Carolina, you know? So I'm like, is he going to land there? I think he lands with the Rams, but they're already 3-9 anyway. So, like, what are the Rams going to do with Baker Mayfield? Even if they win out, they're most likely not making the playoffs. Hell, the playoff picture had the Packers at 5-8 and the Lions, I think, at 5-7, already pretty much out of it because of how bad the NFC South is. Bucks right now in first with the 6-6 record. If they just keep winning and staying ahead of the rest of the division, that's all Tom Brady needs to get in. And they have the expanded playoff. Seahawks have been cooling down. The NFC East is still strong, though, and I think we might see the rest of the leagues or the teams from that side make the playoffs all from the East. Because I keep waiting for the Giants to start to cool off. Instead, they're tying Washington to stay with that high winning percentage, which is just insane. What do you think of the tiebreaker? Do you think they should get rid of the ties in the NFL?
I think it's hilarious because there's so much talk of the World Cup stupid because games can end in a tie, and then you have those two just drag knuckles to a tie.
Well, that's what I don't get because everyone says that, but like the actual World Cup tournament, they don't end in a tie. They do like penalty kicks or whatever, right? So there's no tie. The tie is only in the group stage, like the qualification, which they're talking about changing completely for next year. Let's get into the World Cup since you brought it up. So United States does not advance in the World Cup. I think most of the favorites came in and advanced. I don't also get the point where people are saying that if the best athletes from other sports came together, like, do you really think Mike Trout's going to be able to run a long distance in a soccer match kicking bullets? Like, no way. It takes a different type of athlete to play the game. It's just kind of like you can't throw a baseball player into the football field or like a basketball player into football because it doesn't really work all the time. I mean, look at Michael Jordan going into baseball. Everyone says, oh, no, he would have been great if he took all his time to it. He might not have. He might have been decent, but he's not going to be like considered one of the greatest of all times because it's a different skill set. You can practice all you want and be that guy. But like when you're a bigger guy like he was, basketball is probably more your sport, right? It takes different body types for different things. Like wrestlers are usually more like compact and stuff. You're not going to have a big lanky guy that you're not going to have to leverage. That's just how it works. That's why the Olympics has so many different sports to play to your strength. So maybe some guys could translate, just like Deion Sanders and Bo Jackson can play multiple sports, right? But that's going to be the minority of people. Like, you can't convince me that if LeBron was on our soccer team, we would be better. I mean, he got the flopping down. That's it. I wouldn't be like, oh, yeah, I've seen him brick a ton of free throws. I'm sure he'd be great at kicking with finesse, you know? Maybe a guy like Steph Curry or someone where they're known for like finesse and shooting, maybe they would be able to translate that to soccer, but we don't really know. Even Kobe, he had a passion for soccer. And I think a lot of those guys, they talk about like how in the United States, well, you don't have the chance to make the money. Some of those other guys make a ton of money, like Ronaldo, Messi. You just got to be able to get that type of talent into that next level. So I think going forward, the United States needs to keep focusing on developing talent, people that have a passion for soccer. If you want to advance, get guys that have a passion for the game, get them to learn, and then go from there. Once you're locked in at having team and a team dynamic, you can't change the coach every tournament, which it seems like the United States does. They overreact. I know they didn't qualify last time. The next one's an automatic qualifier. Everyone's using that as a negative, like, well, they're not going to come in prepared because they're not going to have to work. I think this is a chance to really try to push for goals. No, don't sit back. You're the underdog. The United States didn't really play like they were the underdog. And I think looking at the list here, only Morocco beat Spain, and then Croatia beat Japan, which I don't even know if that would be considered an upset. But most of the favorites moved through: Netherlands, Argentina, Brazil, England, France, and Portugal. Right? Those are the rest of the field. So if the United States wants to compete, they're ranked 16th. They made the Sweet 16, basically. I think that's a good season. If you were talking about college basketball, if a team ranked in the top 16 made the Sweet 16, I think that would be considered a good season. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I would like to see, because I just think there's an emphasis on athletics and training and having access to the sports medicine stuff that I think a lot of other countries don't seem to have. I would like to see us do better in it, but I don't know what would have to happen to make that happen.
Yeah, that's the one thing where if you want to take that next step, you have to get a couple upsets, right? You got to make the Elite Eight or maybe the semifinals. I know they call them like the quarterfinals or whatever, but it's easier to understand from like a basketball terminology. If everyone says like, hey, the United States made the Final Four in soccer in the World Cup, I think that would go a longer way to like help build hype for it compared to, oh yeah, they're in the group stage or things that people just don't understand. So going forward, I'd like to see them try to implement a little bit more. It looked like our guys were gassed too, like what you said. If you have all the sports medicine stuff, why aren't they better trained? Like, you should be able to outrun some of these smaller countries like Wales. Like, no knock on them, but they just don't have the population to pull from that the United States has. And I think going forward, they should try to do that. But we'll see how it goes. Definitely going to try to go to the World Cup next time, depending on how they do the tickets and stuff. We might not get to see the United States, but I'm definitely looking forward to it. Speaking of performance and stuff, my man Barry Bonds, not picked for Major League Baseball. They put in the crime dog, Fred McGriff, which I like McGriff. Brave. I think he was on the World Series team, so he's a champion. Awesome guy, but there's no way that you can leave like Clemens and Bonds and Schilling off, which I don't even know if Schilling's is so much performance enhancing other than his off the field behaviors. And he actually had the highest percentage from what I've seen in terms of votes. And so now I don't know what happens. Like, I thought after a few years, like, you couldn't get back in unless you're added by another committee. I don't know if those guys are at it yet. But, like, give me a break. As, like, a kid, I was always excited, like my dad talked about, like, yo, go see Baseball Hall of Fame. I know I had a book that was, like, guys in the Hall of Fame. I would never even do that for my kids now, because it would be like, hey, Dad, who are all these guys? Like, were they awesome? It's like, nah, they were probably, like, decent. Like, they're, like, the second best guys. Well, why aren't the best guys in here? Well, they said that they cheated. Well, wasn't everyone cheating? Well, we don't know. The guy, like, Barry Bonds isn't even caught cheating. So, like, how do you legit know that he was actually cheating compared to everybody else? You don't. They leaked a rumor that, oh, we have a positive test from him, but you don't know if that's fake. You don't know if that was just Major League Baseball trying to cover their ass because they looked like idiots going after him. I mean, Sammy Sosa, he got caught corking a bat, right? So, like, if you get caught in a game corking a bat and you're testing positive for steroids, like, yeah, I could see, like, holding a guy like that out, right? But not just, like, on suspicion, right? I just don't get it. It's like, your best guy, your home run leader, what are you trying to do? And I'm looking it up. So, like, if you look it up, he had a cork bat in 2003. And I remember when it happened because it was all over everywhere. He had a broken bat, and, like, the cork was just, like, out there on the field.
He's like, oh, yeah, that's the one that I use for batting practice.
Yeah, that's my batting practice bat that he had been using, like, for a couple games in a row, they said. Classic. He had it, like, all planned out, too. They're like, yeah, that was mine. And then he tried to blame it on, like, the bat boy, I think. Like, yeah, he must have gave me that wrong bat. But they were, like, totally different bats. So, like, it was something that, like, you would never mess up. But Bonds, like, really didn't have anything other than the sports writers hated him. They hated Roger Clemens. And so now it just seems like a beef between sports writers, which in 2022, who cares about sports writers, right? You look at, like, their bad reporting, and, like, even the NFL, like, Adam Schefter's putting out, like, all these pieces on, like, Deshaun Watson turning around. Did he even write that? Did someone else from the NFL's, like, legal team write that article? I don't even know if he's doing work. Like, the Redskins emails came out, like, years ago before they changed their name. It was like Adam Schefter was, like, sending them emails asking them if it was okay if he could publish, like, stories about them. So they were proofreading their own stories, right? A journalist doesn't do that. That's just kind of like a shill. You might as well just be the NFL guy. Like, hey, are you the insider? Like, no, I just write exactly what they tell me to write. Like, I literally email them, and they write it down for me. And then I just post it, and I'm, like, the face of it. So it's, like, embarrassing. Baseball is like, oh, look at all these great baseball sports writers. Like, nobody cares. No one cares at all. No, the baseball has so many games. You're not reading whatever your favorite sports writer writes every single day for baseball. You're not dying that much for baseball content. You're just not. So they don't even get that many people watching on TV. So people aren't really reading. That's why all the newspapers are cutting their sports writers. That's why I also thought it was funny whenever Twitter was getting taken over by Elon Musk, that everyone was saying, like, all these sports writers were posting their, like, hey, read my own blog now. Go back and read my blog because I might not use Twitter anymore. It's like, nobody's clicking on that link, buddy. Nobody. Right? They're already on Twitter. They read it at a glance. If you were able to get people on your blog, you would have already been doing that. Like, there's like a handful of like college sports sites that are, and like even forums and blogs already for professional teams. If you weren't doing that already, they're not going to just start randomly reading you. You would have already had an audience to do that, because why else would you throw that money away? So I know it was a tangent off the NFL stuff, but I'm going all crazy off schedule here, off script. Anything you want to add on that?
I just have a problem with the way that their criteria, because if you're going to say, like, the test, regardless, either prove that Bonds was using steroids or some enhancement, or let him in. Because how do you pick and choose? It's a mockery.
Well, like, Pujols is coming up, right? If he keeps playing like Tom Brady and he gets close to like Babe Ruth's home run record, did they celebrate him as the number 2 home run leader? Right? Like, are they going to just pretend Barry doesn't exist? Or is he going to be like the home run leader? Like, that's what they tried to do. Was it this year with Aaron Judge? They were like ignoring Barry Bonds a single season and even McGuire's, and they were saying like, well, this is the Yankees record, right? Those other teams, like, who cares about them? It's not like they were in Mile High Stadium or whatever the hell, Coors Field. Is that what it's still called? Where you get the boost from home runs. But even Judge, doesn't the Yankee Stadium still have that short field for left-handed hitters? Or is he right-handed? I don't even know. I don't care about the Yankees. So, I'm going to look and see. That's left. What does he do?
I want to say left.
No, it looks like he... What the hell's T? Is he a switch hitter? Or is he right? It says RRBT. So maybe he is a right-handed hitter? I don't know. Which is better for a Yankee guy, right? Because that left-handed fence is short. But I don't know. It looks like he might be right-handed. He can bat left-handed, at least in spring training. According to that on article, I don't know what he bats in the regular season. I don't like the Yankees. Anything you want to talk about for the NFL too? I kind of went way off topic since we started talking about World Cup.
No, not really too much with the NFL. Although I did see that Verlander signed with the Mets, and that breaks my heart.
I know. He was a supporter of the show. Remember they sent us the poster of him when he was with the Tigers, and then he was like gone like the next week. I thought, well, thanks, buddy.
I thought he would look really good in a St. Louis uniform.
No, definitely didn't want him there. I definitely don't want him on the Mets though either. So I guess I would take St. Louis over the Mets. But Mets lost to DeGrom. I don't even know if that's going to be better for him or like a worse case scenario. Like, I honestly don't know what I feel for the Mets. Although after their epic collapse, like, that's just still funny to me. It would be like the Vikings right now are 10-2. And the Packers are like 5-8, and the Lions are 5-7. It would be like one of them beating the Vikings to win the division. And like Vikings fans would be like, what the hell? Getting into like the playoffs, you know? Like, how did we have such a gigantic lead and we blew it? It's not like they're coming back from like 2 games. Like, the Braves had a losing record in like May or whatever. And I thought, well, this is at least they got the World Series before they choked the next season away. And then they came back and won it all. Like, it's just insane. So, I don't know. I wonder, the Pirates, one of their guys, asked for a trade already. And they were like, well, this is totally out of left field. Like, we didn't even know. And that was after their guy came out and held that press conference. I don't even know if we talked about it on the show. So the Pirates had like a press conference that was private where they came out to like go with Major League Baseball rules and have a press conference talking about their outlook for the next season. But they had it like private because they were basically saying they're not looking to compete next season. So they didn't want local media there covering it. It was like the most insane thing I've ever heard. Like, hey, guys, we're definitely not competing next year, but this is private because we don't want it to show up in newspapers because we need people to buy season tickets. But it's like, what are you doing? At some point, you just sell the team. Sell the team. What are you doing? If you can't compete, just sell the team. Even the Rays are able to turn it around, and they don't even have fans. They should just move to Durham and just have the minor league team winning all the minor league championships. How did the Rays have like one of the best minor league systems? I don't get it. And the Pirates are like decades into building their minor league system. They still can't do it. Embarrassing. I don't have anything for the NFL either. We're going to keep an eye on Major League Baseball because now that the Braves are doing well, I don't have to ignore it, right? And the Tigers, man, they support the show. I'd like to see them come back, having an AL team to cheer for, right? Why not make a run and try to get like rebuild? They're in like year 3 of their rebuild, I think. When were they? I forget when they supported the show. It was a couple years ago, but that was right when they were like getting ready to rebuild. So I feel like they have to start to making a jump at some point. Otherwise, if you keep waiting, you're going to be the Pirates. And then
No, they're due to put it together.
I'm hoping that they are. I was surprised, like, with the NL, like, having the Mets put it together and the Phillies put it together and the Braves put it together all at the same time. It's going to be a battle this year. I think that makes it a lot more fun compared to, like, the Braves winning 15 times in a row or whatever they did back in the day. And yet you're winning the division and then you're just losing in the playoffs. So it's like, what are you doing, buddy? Now I know how, like, Clemson fans feel, right? Going forward. They won 7 division titles. They won, like, what, 1 natty or 2?
2.
So they already beat the Braves. And then if they just keep winning the division, like, I guess maybe Oklahoma would be a better comparison, right? Because, like, they were winning the conference every year, and they brought home no titles. They weren't even close in the playoffs, though. So it's like, what are you doing? And anything else you have for the NFL? I think I already asked you that.
No.
So let's go ahead. I got a good one for you here for our first college football topic. I guess I'll put it as championship. We got to even change this part, but this is the most embarrassing thing I think I've ever seen. At the halftime of the Michigan-Purdue game, they brought in Nick Saban wearing a red suit to match his red face in the screenshot to just whine and beg for Alabama to be included in the playoffs. And I don't know why. Alabama had no chance. Alabama had 2 losses, man. 10-2 record, 2-2 versus the top 25. So it's not like they had 5 ranked wins or something like they've been so incredible. They talked about, we have the 41st football or FBS strength of schedule. Yeah, because you just played Austin Peavy 2 weeks ago, and he even brought in that they have a 3-game winning streak. And the Fox guy didn't even have the balls to say, buddy, one of those games was Austin Peavy. Like, are you serious that you have a 3-game winning streak going? But he also wanted to highlight his 22.8 point per game differential, which I thought was funny because, Matt, they ended up the season ranked 5th. Their point differential was also 5th for the year. Michigan was number 1. Georgia was number 2. Ohio State was number 3, which is funny that he brought that up because Ohio State's better than him at that stat. Tennessee was number 4, which Tennessee also beat them. And so if you're looking for a 2-loss team to be included in the playoff, it should have been Tennessee. Or hell, Penn State. Penn State might be the 3rd best team. We don't know. If Michigan and Ohio State meet for the national championship,
we know it's not Penn State.
If Michigan and Ohio State meet for the national championship, Matt, that's Penn State's only losses were to both of those teams. If Penn State wins the Rose Bowl against Utah in like convincing fashion, why wouldn't Penn State be ranked third, right? You don't know. Those 3 teams only beat each other, and Michigan and Ohio State both made the playoffs. I think with Bama, you have 2 losses, man. You can't say about your quarterback getting hurt and stuff. Tennessee had a quarterback injury. Why wouldn't Tennessee be ahead of you? Same record. You don't have to go to margin of victory like Alabama keeps saying, like, oh, they only lost by a couple. Yeah, they barely beat Texas with Texas's backup quarterback. They should have lost that game. They should very easily have 3 losses. But Tennessee should be nowhere behind Bama. They beat them head-to-head, and...
Well, I think the knock with Alabama is that, like, when you look at their roster, it's... Yeah, they had some... Like, he pointed out about the injuries, but it's like, so your 5-star whatever got hurt, and you're replacing him with a 4-star or another 5-star. Like, that's unexcusable.
That's why, when I'm looking at this, and, like, going forward... with Bama, and they talk about like the expanded playoffs, I really hope that getting more teams in the playoffs every year starts to spread out that talent, and then we'll see how good of a coach Nick Saban actually is, right? When you have the number 1 recruiting class for however many years in a row, you should be winning titles. I wonder if people would take what you're projected, like your team talent composite, what were they ranked going into the season, and what did you end up? Like as a plus and minus, right? Because like if Bama's ranked number 1 every year, Nick Saban has to have a negative record overall because he's not. They didn't finish ranked first every year. So I would think some other coaches, like I know TCU, Sonny Dykes is a new coach there, but like this year they were picked nowhere to be anywhere near that. Their team talent is nowhere near the top 10, I don't think. So like for him to finish in the top 4. I think that's a hell of a coaching job. Same with Tennessee. Tennessee had a recruiting around like what Michigan had. So for them to beat Bama, you can't point at the Vegas line. The Vegas line has nothing to do with who they think is going to win. It doesn't. It's all who is going to get money put on them. Like if they're going to move the line based on what people are betting, not what the team's going to do. What people are betting. People think that Bama is going to beat Tennessee on the rematch. Okay, they'll bet on it. Doesn't mean that they will. They were the favorite in the first game and they lost. So that's my thing. I don't know why Fox even allowed that. The Big Ten, their commissioner should have been on the phone and having them double their pay for that Big Ten championship game because of allowing that to even be shown. Why not show Ryan Day? Why not show some of the other coaches from around the league? Why not bring on Sonny Dykes? Right, his team just lost. Why not bring on Lincoln Riley and say why they should still be in after losing? Why just Nick Saban for 5? It felt like an eternity. And it was just so bad that it was like, why am I watching this? This is a Big Ten championship game. The entire thing should be about the Big Ten. Not Nick Saban making a fool of himself. Just sad at this point. Sad. Because like I don't even know. If you're a fan of another team, like that would have to just annoy the shit out of you. Like if you're a fan of USC and you're like, man, we just got stomped by Utah. That was bad. And then we have to listen to Nick Saban like beg that his 2-loss team is better than USC. And he threw shade at Ohio State saying like, yeah, if we had Vegas lines, I bet we'd be favored over them or whatever. It's like, you don't know that. You don't even know if you could beat Ohio State. You almost lost to Texas. Man, just take your loss. And I don't even know, because let's get into the college football thing, because there's some more other things that got me fired up. So the college football rankings came out for the final playoff, or the final ranking before the playoff. Georgia's number 1. They will play Ohio State at number 4. Michigan's number 2, and they'll play TCU at number 3. Bama's the first team out. I honestly thought Tennessee should have been ahead of them. It's very clear to me that if Clemson didn't lose to South Carolina, they would have been in the playoff. And I'll tell you why. I've heard a lot of Clemson fans down here. I've been talking to them, and they've told me like there's no way Clemson would have got in because they were behind Bama or whatever. The committee's been pretty even keel with this. They know that it goes by losses. They said years ago that it goes by how many wins you have, but they pick and choose what tiebreakers they want. So like in 2014, they asked the Big 12, who is your true champion? And the media never brings this up again for whatever reason. The Big 12 said they're both our champions, and they put the committee in a bind to the point where the Big 10 said, well, Ohio State's our champion, so you should just put them in. And that's exactly what they did. Like the Big 12 had a chance to say, no, I forget who won the head-to-head. Like, no, Baylor won the head-to-head. They're our true champion. They should be in the playoff. And I honestly think they would have kept Ohio State out that year. But the Big Ten commissioner didn't do that. He tried to smooth his way to get 2 teams in. And the committee just said, like, whatever, we're not going to put either of them in. Like, don't annoy us. So then, like, a couple years ago, when the SEC started to get 2 teams in, it was the same thing. They're looking at the win-loss. If it's a tie, the tiebreaker comes in as conference champions, where if Clemson comes in with 1 loss, I know they lost to Notre Dame. I know that Ohio State beat Notre Dame. So you could say that Ohio State's the better team, but Clemson would have had 1 more win, and they would have had the conference championship. There's no way that they would have been able to put Ohio State in, because then you open yourself up to lawsuits by like states and like even Cincinnati last year. There's no way they could have put Cincinnati out of the playoffs and put Notre Dame in. Because I keep hearing that, like, oh, Notre Dame, I'm so shocked that they weren't in last year. It's like, no. If they would have put a Notre Dame team in that lost to Cincinnati, then they would have had how many lawsuits come in from other conferences and states? Like, they have to kind of just do it by the books and point at it and say, this is our reasoning. They have 1 less loss. You had 2 losses. Like, sorry, guys, you all had 2 losses. You're out. 2 or more. Like, we would love to put you in, but we're just not going to do that. And the tiebreaker thing, or like them they wanted to put Ohio State ahead of TCU. Everyone kept saying that. So you can get a rematch between Michigan and Ohio State in the first round. That would have been a big slap in the face to the Big Ten. And I'll tell you why. Because in the actual listing, it's like number 2 in their list of things to consider. They are going to avoid rematches in the opening round. It's right there. There's no reason they would have put Michigan and Ohio State together. It's in their bylaws that they're going to avoid regular season rematches if possible. And this is a very clear case where all 3 and 4 both had essentially the same record, no conference championship. Let's avoid that rematch. Now, does it work out against Georgia? Possibly. But I consider Georgia to be a better Michigan, right? And Michigan handled Ohio State pretty easily at the end of that game. So if Georgia's looking at them and they're saying, well, we can just kind of do what Michigan did, but did it better, we'll probably beat Ohio State. Like, that might be, I think TCU is more of an unknown to me going in. So I don't even know why people keep saying like TCU is garbage. They have a great quarterback. He's a playmaker, is able to use his feet. Like you said in that game, like I didn't get to watch the end of their game, but I don't know why you would go to I formation. I watched the highlights. Like, why would you do that? Like, go for the win. I feel like the Big 12 championship games, it's always like a coaching disaster. Last year with Oklahoma State not being able to score. This year, TCU not being able to score. But I really don't think there's any way that the Big 12 could have been left out without opening up the NCAA or whatever this playoff committee is to like further scrutiny. No 2-loss team has ever made the playoff. It's always been teams, like when there's controversy about teams getting in, it's always been teams that have had essentially the same record. USC would have easily been in. The playoff was already set. It wouldn't even have mattered if TCU had lost or won. Like, I honestly think that the playoffs still would have been Georgia, Michigan, TCU, and then USC, no matter what had happened. If they didn't lose. Now, USC drops all the way to 10 because Utah beat them twice, so they have to be behind Utah. I was kind of surprised that Penn State fell all the way down. But again, they don't have a conference championship. If they would have beat Ohio State, Penn State would have been the 4th team in. People were arguing. Penn State fans are arguing with me all weekend about this. They only would have had 1 loss. It would have been to Michigan. And it was essentially the same margin of victory, 20-something points that Ohio State lost to Michigan by. And it was earlier in the year. Penn State would have ended the season on whatever game winning streak. And unfortunately, because they played the conference champ at Michigan early, their one-loss team, they would have been sitting there instead of Ohio State. They 100% would have been team number 4. So the Big Ten would have had 4 teams in, whether it was Penn State or Ohio State. I think for the strength of the conference, the Big Ten should have hoped for Penn State to make it, or like Michigan State. I think that's what SEC gets the bump for the strongest conference, because they get teams in like Georgia and Bama and LSU and teams that are multiple teams winning the national championship, where the Big Ten, the past 20, 30 years, they haven't had that. Ohio State's only had 2 titles the past 20 years. Michigan had 1 before that. And then before that, who? Penn State's titles were before they joined the Big Ten. When was the last Big Ten title before that? It's really only Michigan and Ohio State that have had a chance in the past 20 years. So both of them getting in, not a surprise. I think now the Big Ten has a chance to earn 2 extra playoff payouts too if they both make the national championship, just like the SEC got last year for the same reason, avoiding the rematch. Was it fair to Michigan last year? No. Did Michigan maybe make out this year? Possibly. They don't get to play a pissed off rival in the first round that they had just beat, right? So I think you're looking at something going forward where right now it's pretty clear why they picked the teams that they did. It all made sense. Some teams, they have to be kicking themselves. Like Dabo has to be kicking himself that he didn't switch quarterbacks earlier in the South Carolina game, because it basically cost them a playoff spot.
Yep.
So,
but I think it all boils down to when you're, like we've talked before, win your games. Win your games, and it's a non-factor. You know, you look at Alabama, look at Tennessee, look at Clemson, look at USC. Win your game. Win your game, and it's a non-factor.
Well, it's the same reason why I'm surprised that like the Pac-12 did what they did. They went ahead and got rid of divisions so that you can have your best 2 teams play each other for the championship. Why? You're not getting rewarded for that at all, right? You're better having your second best team stay without that extra loss just in case, right? You saw it in 2016 when Ohio State jumped Penn State because Penn State had the 2 losses I talked about, and Ohio State took the bid, even though Ohio State lost to Penn State that year. Penn State lost to Michigan and Pitt, so they were out.
You're absolutely right. And look at Penn State right now. Like, you're talking about them being potentially the 4th best team. And outside of Michigan and Ohio State, who would you say would be a marquee win for them? Northwestern? Maryland?
Matt,
like, there's none of those games that matter.
I bring it up because Alabama was talking about how they beat Auburn by 20 points. Penn State went into Auburn Stadium and beat them by more points than Bama did. So you can't tell me objectively that Bama's better than Penn State. You can't. Penn State has, if you're comparing teams that played each other, Penn State would be the better team. They have the better losses. They have, if you're going head to head on who they played, comparison, Penn State has the better win. What does Bama really have, right? That's why I brought Penn State up, because Alabama's argument loses if you compare them to Penn State. It just does. Maybe they don't have the wins. Alabama doesn't have the wins either.
I'll be honest, though, of the 4 teams that are in the playoffs, the one team that would give Alabama the biggest problem is TCU.
That's why I said TCU is a wild card. I don't know if that's a benefit of Michigan playing them, right?
Because I think with TCU and Sonny Dykes running that air raid with his mobile quarterback, that's a major wild card that I think hurts. It gives them an edge, but it's also, that was one of the things that made Ohio State more competitive, is that they had the quarterback runs that kept the offense open that they don't have this year. So you have 3 basically smash mouth run first teams in TCU.
Well, Ohio State's not run first team. You talking about Bama?
No, I think Ohio State, they run the ball a good bit. Their passing game's so vanilla because it's predicated on their run game.
I don't know if you've watched Ohio State this year, Matt. They haven't been able to run at all. They're basically a watered-down version of Mike Leach's offense. Where
No, they reminded me of Penn State's offense that year they won the Big Ten, where they just threw punts up. Like, there's no reason why, for as much talent composite that Ohio State has, that they run this grab bag offense. They could easily just run the ball down everyone's throat if they wanted to.
Well, that's because in the Big Ten, but they couldn't do that against like Penn State or Michigan. I think I'm trying to look for the numbers exactly, but Ohio State threw at least, I want to say 11 screens in the Michigan game because that was their effective run game. Like they're doing like what Mike Leach would do. 11 screens, and then I think like 9 passes underneath like 5-10 yards. So like half of Stroud's passing was basically making up for the run game. He threw 48 times. Like that's not a run first team. He's just basically running to set up or passing to set up the run game, which they really didn't have. And then I think that's why TCU is running a similar system, but to your point, they have a mobile quarterback. Stroud isn't getting extra yards with his legs, so they're going to be more one-dimensional for Georgia. And Michigan gave Georgia the blueprint on what to do. Ohio State's other wide receiver opted out of the playoffs, so they're not getting anyone back, to my knowledge, that could help open that up. I know a couple of their running backs were banged up, and yeah, they're getting like 6 yards a pop, but when most of your runs come against like the teams early in the year that aren't very good, of course you're going to have a high yards per carry. But we'll see what happens. I think the playoff committee got it right. And going forward, I think it's going to be a lot more fun when we get to the 12-team playoff. I have the 12-team playoff projected next. So let's take a quick look at this one. I was kind of torn on the 12-team playoff, but after watching Michigan play Purdue and Ohio State sit at home and back into the playoffs, I wondered, like, what is the benefit of Michigan playing this game? Like, would it be better if Michigan lost to Purdue because they would know that they had a playoff spot locked up? A loss might potentially keep Ohio State out because, like, they're not going to put Ohio State in over Michigan. Michigan, they'd have the same record, and Michigan crushed them head-to-head. But then I thought, well, the bye for the new playoff format might actually make sense because the only teams that can earn a bye are conference champs. So now you're getting teams like Utah. They would have been the 4th team in if the playoff was this year. It would have been Georgia, Michigan, Clemson, and Utah getting byes. Now I'm using the actual committee rankings here, but I would think that like Michigan has like Alabama and USC at 7 and 10. I don't think that they would have put those two together. I think there's going to be some like NCAA basketball type ranking finaglings, right? To move things around. Like I wouldn't have been surprised if Alabama would have ended with like a more favorable matchup, right? I think like they would have bumped Alabama down to like, oh, well, sorry, now you're going to be like 5th. You're going to be taking TCU spot. You'll be playing Tulane. Like I think there's going to be some jerry-rigging the system going forward for some of these teams. Like, there's no way they would have kept Ohio State playing Penn State in the first round. I think Penn State probably would have been kicked to maybe Kansas State's spot to play Tennessee and then potentially Georgia, which probably wouldn't have helped them. But I think that that's the way they're going to do it, is try to spread out the conferences. Right now, like Tennessee wouldn't have to play Georgia round 2. Tennessee would probably be, I don't know. I don't even know. I'd have to like splice this out a little bit better, but I think they're really going to try to spread out the different conferences and then have the automatic bids. The funny thing that I thought about is like, if Purdue would have beat Michigan, would Tulane have got that 4th spot? Like ACC's in, the SEC, the Pac-12, maybe the Big 12 would have got it with Kansas State. But if another team would have had an upset loss, like, are they going to jump them in the rankings? Or like, is Tulane going to possibly get that bye, which to me would be funny, right? I just don't see how the lower conferences don't beg for there to be some type of expansion. And I think we're going to see something. I don't know if we're going to see a full expanded playoff, but I almost wonder if the other smaller conferences get together and have some type of play-in game like the NCAA tournament, right? Like I wouldn't be surprised in like 2 years if they had a +1 where Tulane would play like the winner of the MAC or something, you know? Whoever the second best other conference winner is. I just think that's a way to get other conferences to buy in as the other big boys expand, right? Like why not give them another chance? But what do you think of this format? I'm actually more open to it now that Michigan would have directly been affected by it.
Like we talked previously, I think there's, no matter how you spit it, there's going to be teams that are left out, and then you're going to be second guessing like, well, right now we have 12. I don't know that I agree with 12. Let's bump it to 16, and maybe that gives us the inclusive model that we want. And you go to 16 as well. I still don't know if that's we need 24, you know. And at what point do you just say we can't expand it anymore?
Well, that's what my thought was. But I'm also wondering too, because you hear a lot of people saying like these lower teams aren't going to compete. If you do the +1 for the 12th spot, right now you would have Tulane playing, and Tulane's 11-2. They would be playing UTSA Roadrunners from Conference USA that are also 11-2, and they went undefeated in their conference. That's the next best conference winner, and so I think a 12 + 1 to get to 13. I think that might be a better solution without having to worry about it, because right now you can always point and say, well, win your conference, right? Conferences get the automatic bid, I believe, the first 6. So they're basically giving it to the Power 5 +1. And I think if they make it a +2, then you're getting 7 conference champions automatically in, and then 6 at large. And I think that pretty much takes care of everyone, unless what would happen is if the conferences keep expanding at a certain point, maybe we go to like 8 conferences, then to your point, maybe just go to a 16-team model where all 8 conference champions play 8 at large, and then we see something like that. But until we see more movement, I don't think they're going to really change the alignment of this. Because like there are independents too, like Notre Dame, that have no chance of getting a bye. If they make the playoffs 3 years in a row and always lose in the first round, you better believe that they'll be joining a conference, Matt. Right? They'll want that bye because it makes them look better. They're playing in the bowl weekend. Because right now, I think that second round is going to replace the bowl games, right? Or I don't even know when the timeline is going to be. The Rose Bowl finally signed off on it, and the Rose Bowl means nothing. Like, I don't care if Michigan makes the Rose Bowl. Like, are you kidding me? I don't care about that at all.
But I think maybe the better route to go is the more you expand it, you turn some of these end of the year games into like a flex type situation where you say, okay, everyone's games from week. I mean, it would be a logistical nightmare to try to plan it, but to say, okay, instead of 10 weeks, we go to 7 weeks, because we got to factor in, if you're a playoff team, you're going to have these extra weeks. If you don't make the playoffs, we want to try to find you a matchup relatively close to your geographic area. So like you're still getting, like, and I'll just off the top of my head, like a Maryland Rutgers, that like if they're not making the playoffs, they're going to need games during that tail end of the stretch that there's a matchup that they could build.
Well, I think the Big Ten doing their championship weekend, I think takes care of that. Where when COVID hit, the Big Ten had an idea where everyone would play a flex game championship week, and they would take the conference champion, trying to avoid rematches, and then have a consolation game. So this year, like using the same format, like Michigan would play Purdue. That would be like the West champion. Michigan didn't play them. Michigan had already beat Penn State and Ohio State, the next 2 teams. So they would play Purdue for the conference championship and the automatic bid. Penn State and Ohio State would get another rematch as a spot to say like, hey, we're making the playoffs. But since they had already played each other, maybe Ohio State plays Illinois. Maybe Penn State plays whoever they didn't play. Like, I don't know off the top of my head. Did they play Iowa this year? I know Michigan and Ohio State did. So maybe Penn State plays Iowa, right? And then and they could only include teams that are above that bowl eligibility, right? So that they're pushing forward and saying like, look, we're not letting Rutgers or some team like Michigan State. I know Michigan State's not bowl eligible, so they're not going to let Michigan State get an extra game for no reason, right? If you're bowl eligible, I think what will happen is they'll get pushed into this like consolation prize weekend, which would have been right after Thanksgiving. And then that way the teams are done. You don't have to worry about like players getting hurt. The bowl games aren't going to exist anymore with the playoffs really anyway, other than like maybe some armed forces bowls and stuff. But I think that would be the best way to go. You get the extra practices or whatever. It's not as stretched out as before. There's not really any reward. But you also give your other teams a chance to like kind of play in. Like, hey, let's see right now, like for the SEC, who knows? Like maybe Mississippi State ranked 22. They might get a shot at Tennessee at 6. I don't know if they played this year. What if Mississippi State knocks them out of the playoffs, right? Because then you're going to get multiple games on that championship week where this past week, Utah knocking off USC was great. The Big Ten game didn't matter. The Big 12 game didn't matter. The SEC game didn't matter. So the only game that mattered was the Pac-12 game, right? Because TCU lost and they're still in. Michigan and Georgia both could have lost and they still would have been in. So why have that game at all? I think having a championship weekend where the conference can say, like the Pac-12 should have said, well, USC, they lost to Utah. Like that matchup might have been the same. TCU already beat Kansas State because they play the 9-game schedule, so it's a little bit tougher. The ACC kind of worked out because Clemson didn't play UNC. But I think having a mold to avoid the rematch, but getting your best 2 teams into that is a fix for them. And then allowing that second team a chance to get in. So like Clemson could have played Florida State, right? Your boys. If they were doing the top 2 in the ACC, Clemson would have played Florida State. Florida State already lost to them. So what's the point of Clemson playing them? Like, no offense. Like, Tar Heels were right there. They had the same record. So, or I guess they had the better conference record. So it would have been the Tar Heels anyway. But then you have Florida State play Pitt. Did they play Pitt this year? I don't think so.
No.
So you have Florida State play Pitt. Right now, they're not in this graphic. But give Florida State one more win. They're 10-3 then, going into the bowl selection. Maybe they get picked over a USC or someone else that didn't win their conference either. Like it gives you one more bullet point because Florida State had the win over LSU. You play like your bowl eligible games before the playoffs. I think that's what's going to happen. At least that would be my recommendation. And then that way, players are home for the holidays. Coaches from these other schools can now focus on recruiting. I think they should push the early signing day back and just have the one signing day because the bowl games won't really matter and it's not fair to have an early signing day while teams are getting ready to play the playoffs, right? Like, oh, let's punish our top dogs, maybe. Maybe they do keep it that way. I don't know.
Well, maybe they need it that way because those guys need an advantage to get better recruits.
But I also think that it hurts new coaches too because like Ohio State just had a coach take a head coaching job in what I don't even know where they're coaching. But he took a job down south and now what's he going to do? Is he going to not coach in the playoffs? Because if he's coaching in the playoffs, he's not giving it 100%. It's impossible to do that. You can't be recruiting for the early signing period and also preparing for Georgia. He's the offensive coordinator. You're just not doing that. So, like, that's another thing, too. If you're looking for gambling lines, like, who's going where? TCU's offensive coordinator wins the Broyles Award. Remember Michigan last year? Josh Gaddis was getting, like, is he leaving? McDonald, the defensive coordinator, he was already signed to the Ravens. Maybe that had an impact with how they handled Georgia and weren't prepared on defense, right? Because the defensive coordinator was interviewing with the NFL. Like, that's a key thing that can happen right now with the early signing period. If you push that back, coaches can consistently coach And then they can go to their new team and say, like, hey, look, I just won the national championship and I'm coming to be the head coach and we're going to win one here. Boom. They don't have to worry about, hey, I would love to coach in the playoffs, but I got to start recruiting right now, so I'm going to have to resign before the playoffs even happen. So that's my only concern with the current format. They have to do something with the signing day. Anything else you have for the playoffs? I have two other quick hit topics at the end here, but I think that's pretty much all I had for the playoffs. I think they got it right. The Big Ten has a chance to prove itself. A Michigan-Ohio State national championship would go a long way to showing that the Big Ten is ready. And it might help other teams pick up recruiting a bit. They have to start picking it up. You can't be making more money than other schools and then be ranked 60th in recruiting. Like, that's just a shame, right? Deion Sanders is coming in, which I think is my next topic, so let's hit that up. Deion Sanders gets picked to be the next head coach of Colorado, right? And I think it's a great move by him. I think they're a sleeping giant. They won a national championship more recently than Penn State. I've been telling people that because they won it in like the 90 year, maybe 91, around there, same as like Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech was also rumored to maybe be interested in Deion Sanders. And so I think this is a good parallel where I think he was mad that Auburn didn't even talk to him. So he's coming into Colorado. He's going to be hot. He has his press conference where he comes in, tells players that he's going to be bringing guys in. So if you don't buy in, you're done. You might as well hit the transfer portal. And then he's hitting the portal very publicly, telling people to reach out to him. And you know how many tweets I saw going to him, Matt, of like grad transfers? It was insane. So I think they're going to be able to build a very talented team next year. You saw it with USC, right? You bring a bunch of transfers in, you're going to have a chance to be a successful coach. He was 26-5 in 3 seasons at Jackson State. Won back-to-back conference championships. Signed the overall number 2 recruit, Travis Hunter, to play for Jackson State. Went undefeated this year in the regular season, the first time ever. And last year he won the Eddie Robinson Award for head coach. A lot of people are knocking that, oh, maybe he was more talented. He just had a more talented team. That doesn't stop people from praising Nick Saban, Matt. Right? No one ever says, like, well, put an asterisk beside Nick Saban because he had the number 1 team talent composite. He was supposed to win this year. But for some reason, they still lost to Auburn. And they backed their way into the playoffs. So Deion Sanders, I think, has a chance here to come in, get his guys. Remember, USC and UCLA are leaving. I think it was their athletic director or president or something. He was interviewed and he said, like, we don't really have the money for this, but it's going to come. I almost wonder if they're going to be pursuing the Big Ten too, right? Why wouldn't they? I think they have strong academics, history. They're kind of a bridge between USC and UCLA. We know Oregon's been begging. We know Washington's been begging. You're not just going to have 4 teams all on the coast. Or Colorado has a history with Nebraska and a rivalry there, right? So there are going to be a bunch of moving pieces where people think, oh, Deion Sanders is only going to be there for 2 years and then he's going to look for a better gig. If Colorado would get invited in expansion to the Big Ten, why would he move? He's going to be in a position where he can recruit the entire West Coast, be able to come in, be in one of the Big 2 conferences already. Like, he's not going to take a job in a lesser conference at that point. And if he's competing in the top 10, in 2016, Colorado, they lost to Michigan, then they won the Big 10, or no, the Pac-12, I mean. And did they make the Rose Bowl that year? I can't remember, but like that, they had a 10-win year. And then they had like some administration type stuff where they had issues with the coach and the program kind of fell apart. But that shows me like they've won recently. It's not like Colorado's been like the dumpster for like the past 20, 30 years. So he could be able to come in, get recruits, and be very successful. What do you think?
I think he definitely has the potential, and with his ability to recruit, I think he could really flip things quick, and I think it helps to his advantage that he has access to the transfer portal. He can very quickly use his NIL connections and get that roster flipped. Now, is the media market going to be big enough in Boulder for Deion? Because I could see him wanting to leave for a bigger market to have more media presence.
But at some point, why does the media matter? If he keeps winning, it doesn't matter where you're coaching. You're going to get the press. Look at Scott Frost at Nebraska. Colorado's in a better position than Nebraska is, and he had so much press, it was unbelievable until he started losing. So I think Deion, if he wants the media, if he's winning, it doesn't matter where you're at. You're going to go ahead and get the press. I mean, even Matt Campbell at Iowa State, how much press was he getting? Right? It was kind of ridiculous at that point. It's like, Iowa State's not even the best team in the state, and they're getting all this press, and he's getting rumored to go to all these other jobs. So I think Deion, Colorado's kind of good for him because he's away from some of that, and he might be more successful there. Now, maybe he's a little angry, and maybe if Florida State came knocking or something, he would jump ship, right? Because that's his school. He's bringing a lot of Florida State guys, it seems, with him. And why not? Like, why wouldn't you try to get guys in that you know have had success in the past? Bring them in. I hear a lot of things about like, well, he might not be a good in-game coach. He better hire good assistants. That's everybody, right? If you hire bum assistants, then you're going to be like Lincoln Riley, where, yeah, your offense is awesome, but your defense just sucks, man. Someone said, like, yeah, they're waiting for the Scooby-Doo meme of like the USC defense taking off their masks, and they're actually the Ohio State defense, Matt. Just not making tackles or anything. So it doesn't matter how talented you are. You have to hire assistants. And I've said before, I think with the way NIL and transfer portal and things are, you're almost better to have a larger-than-life head coach, and then that guy takes all the pressure, gets all the blame and all the love, but then you have assistants underneath him that like just do all the game coaching. You're able to get your stuff in, and they handle it, and then they have a chance to move on to other jobs. Like look at Michigan with Harbaugh. Every year you hear about assistants going to so-and-so, oh, getting hired in the NFL, oh, getting hired here, oh, taking another job there. Some programs like Ohio State's like their assistants never leave. Why? Like, why are they not getting why is Michigan losing more coaches than Ohio State when Ohio State has had better success? So like if Deion's able to take that and say like, look, I'm going to start a program where coaches that are under me are going to be successful, and I'm going to teach you how to do it the right way. Colorado could become one of the premier teams in the West, and not having a tougher schedule probably makes it easier for him because he can out-talent teams there. Look what Lincoln Riley did. He out-talented the Pac-12 this year. If Deion Sanders is able to come in, match that talent, and have like a hard-nosed defense, I don't see why they wouldn't be the favorites like going forward in a year or two. You can easily turn your team around and have them win 8 games next year. I very strongly believe that. So, I mean, I think he's going to be a great hire there. I think that's where he needs to be. He needs to be away from the media. If he was at a place like Miami, where people are hitting him up every day and like all this weird stuff going off the field, it would be something that I think would just be too much. I did have one more thing. Go ahead.
Did you hear about the Southern band director?
Nah, what happened?
At halftime, he called out the Jackson State fans and said, good luck finding another coach now that yours is leaving.
I'm like, I hear about him bringing like the historical black colleges, like how he is abandoning them. But at some point, if he wants to raise awareness for it, I think he did a hell of a job. Like there's no really any way he can't be the one to get them invited to a bigger conference or have their conference get invited to the top level, right? Like somewhere the NCAA has to take that step. Deion Sanders can't do it. Like there's no reason why one of those schools couldn't get called up when you have teams like Coastal Carolina and App State getting the nod, right? But are they going to leave their conference? I don't know. And at that point, like I said, like you almost need the NCAA to be like, yeah, we're going to promote your entire conference and help like promote the entire system. It can't just be Deion Sanders. So people knocking him for that, I just don't get it. Because he did everything that he could do in his position. He's the coach. He's not like the head guy. Anything else you have for college football?
But I think where he got kind of knocked was that he kind of pushed the narrative that he was going to be there for the long haul. And then when the next deal came up, left, which knowing how Deion has been, the writing was on the wall. Like there was nothing that said, oh yeah, he's definitely going to stick around. Because look at how many times he flip-flopped. I mean, hell, even as a player.
Well, that's every coach. Well, coach is there for the long haul.
Even back when he was a player, like he ping-ponged back and forth between Dallas and San Francisco, just as much.
Every player should do that. Look at LeBron jumping teams. Like I don't think he's any different than Deion. If he got into coaching and LeBron was coaching different teams every year, I wouldn't blame him. Like whoever's giving you the most money. If he wins at Colorado, if some other giant school like Auburn then decides like, yeah, we should have hired him, let's throw a ton of money at him, and he jumps, I don't think that's a knock at him. Every coach would do that, right? Look at Matt Rule. He's jumped from Temple to Baylor to Carolina. Now he's at Nebraska. Like sometimes you just start to fail forward, right? Like,
well, that was like the old saying is to move before you get fired. Like you look at Satterfield at Louisville, and
yeah, he's coaching against his new school in the bowl game. If he even coaches, like maybe he's just there scouting.
Yeah, he just said, "I'm just going to be neutral in this."
Yeah, because that's insane.
His old
like
playing his new school, and he can just kind of get a feel for it.
And they talked about him being through the guiding process of them joining a new conference and stuff, and he's hoping that they could do the same for Cincinnati to the Big 12. It's like, I don't think so, guys. That's not the guy you need. You needed a Deion Sanders, man. You need a guy to come in and be all hype, and then have like the recruits come in. Like Satterfield's not getting you that. If anything, you're going to fall backwards now. You should have got Urban Meyer. What were you thinking? What else was I going to say? I had one other thing, but I can't remember. I did have one more college football thing for my final bell. The EA College Football, they officially announced that it's releasing in 2024. And I think I mentioned this to you off the show, that I think they pushed it back to match up with the playoffs. Because I hear a lot of people complaining that they're just reskinning Madden, and there's no way they're going to put out a game in 2023 that includes the old bowl system, when in 2024 you can just focus on having the 12-team playoff, because they would have to redo all that logic in 1 year. Now, is the gameplay going to be the same as Madden? Oh yeah, most likely. Are there going to be microtransactions? Yeah, that's EA Sports. Like, what are you talking about? You know what to expect with this game. You shouldn't have a high opinion. I hear people saying like, oh, you should try these other games. And I have tried alternate football games, but they try to jam pack in all these franchise modes and customizable teams and rosters. And I honestly think a company, if they want to compete with EA football, college football, what you need to do is recreate using like modern Unreal Engine or whatever, Unity, whatever engine you want to do, but recreate the game the original Tecmo Bowl. There was no franchise mode. There was no customization. It was literally just a tournament, right? Where it randomized whatever, how many teams you have in there, 16 teams, 8 teams. I think it was like 12 or so. And then they had a playoff, and that was it. Because then you can focus on just getting the gameplay right. If you can get the gameplay right, then the rest of the game you can follow in the next year. But I see a lot of companies, they're like, look at all these franchise things we've been adding, but they don't make any improvements to the actual football part. And you try to play it and it plays like crap. So if you want to do it, do the gameplay first and then do the add-ons. Because everyone always talks about EA. They're not even adding anything at this point. All they're doing is minor tweaks to like the tackling and stuff. Do that. The alternate companies need to do that. Access Football. What was the other one? Maximum Football or something like that. Didn't Doug Flutie have like his own spin-off where it was like, hey, you can customize every team, but whenever you try to throw the ball, the guy's like, looks like he's looking the wrong way and the ball goes like 5 feet. Like, yeah. And honestly, I think they should put it on computers for PC so that people can help mod it, so that they can help improve it and make it like more open source instead of trying to just put it on like PlayStation and Xbox. Because at that point, by the time you get it released, it's like halfway through the football season, no one cares. So that's my take on it. That's my take on it. I've been dying for a good football game, Matt. I replay Tecmo Super Bowl. It comes out every year. Someone releases a college football version and someone releases an NFL version. And it's awesome playing as Michigan, man, because Michigan's good on it. And then for the NFL, like playing as Ben Roethlisberger and some of those other guys I know me and you used to play on, was it Thanksgiving or Christmas every year? Yep. With the new rosters, like that's all I need. Work on the gameplay. I don't care about a franchise mode. If you get the gameplay right, you can always add in franchise mode later, because a lot of that is just like logic for like math and like trying to just get the schedules and like the randomization stats and things like that. It's all math you can add in later as like a downloadable package. But if the game sucks, no one's going to play franchise if the actual game sucks. Then it just becomes a sim, and then why have the football part at all? Like there's already a soccer game, I think it's Football Manager or something like that they call it, that's just sim. Just do that then. Don't bill yourself as a Madden alternative whenever the gameplay of Madden is why everyone likes it. What do you think? You going to get college football when it comes out?
I don't know. I want to see what they do with it first.
You want to be paying to unlock some Florida State Seminoles? I want to see if they do it like a great team. Because like Madden back in the day, they used to have like the NFL greats. So like I think that would be a good way to like get some of the past guys that maybe didn't make NIL money. But then you look at like how far back do you go? Do you include guys that were like big in the NFL? Like if Michigan had a roster with like Desmond Howard and like Charles Woodson and Tom Brady, like, oh yeah, that's awesome. But do they really need help with like the NIL? I'm sure Tom Brady would be like, oh yeah, I'll play as Michigan on here. Like that'd be sweet. Could you imagine playing college football game with Tom Brady as the QB? That'd be sweet. Right? So let's get that going. I want to see like if they do that, but I'm also not going to throw $2 to just Tom Brady's TB12 to get him on the Michigan team. Like that.
Remember, TB12 was like barely even a starter at Michigan, so it's not like you'd get him on your team, and you're not getting Tampa Bay Tom Brady. You're getting,
Matt, you don't remember him?
I can't compete for the starting job.
Matt, Tom Brady beat Alabama at Michigan. What are you talking about? Alabama's the best team, right? Nick Saban says so. They should have been in the playoffs this year. So he beat Alabama. So that's how great Tom Brady was at Michigan. Of course, he got his national championship ring as a backup, which would have been awesome if he had won his own. But sometimes you don't get all the breaks till you're in the NFL, right? So why not? But that's what I want to see. Like, hey, what about Denard Robinson? Like, he really didn't have an NFL career. Maybe he wants some NIL money. He was literally on the cover of NCAA football, right? So maybe have like a way to get some of those funds to some of the older players. I just don't. I hope to God it doesn't include the playing card game where you get $5 and you get a pack of cards, and then whatever you get, whatever random guy you get. Because that would be the one way where I would never spend any money on it, right? Add in randomization, and I'm out. Because I don't want to be throwing extra money to like Georgia players or something.
There you go.
Let me get my money to my Michigan guys if I'm going to play a football game. I'd put like an extra $5 or whatever in to unlock the Michigan guys and have that money go directly to their NIL fund. I know they have it. Every team basically has it at this point. And it'd be a good way for like just to get that extra money directly to them. And then the team can split it up however you want. Now, some teams are going to get paid less. Yeah, most likely. But I don't know what other fair way they could do it, right? Whatever the sale is, if the game's $60, every team will get a percentage of that. And then if they sell like an extra package with like player names, maybe you can get the whole Big Ten for an extra $10 or something. I think that's how they're going to have to do it. But we'll wait and see. I hope it's not all money. Like, You can get the full version of NCAA football for only $200. Because then that would be a quick way to lose fans, right?
Yep.
All right. That's all I had for the final, Bill. You have anything else you want to hit on?
Yeah, I was excited. Jordan Travis announced he's coming back for his senior year, so start the hype now for next year's Heisman Trophy winner.
Hasn't he been there for 15 years? He's like Stetson Bennett, dude.
And Stetson Bennett is playing for in the college football playoff. This is exactly where we want to be.
I see like people are like, hey, yeah, so-and-so's coming back. I'm like, the COVID year really gets people coming back, which I'll be honest, it's actually helping Michigan because this is the first year that like it seems that Michigan has guys coming back. And I was even going to text you and say like, well, Harbaugh announced early that he's coaching Michigan next year. He's not looking at the NFL this year. And a bunch of Michigan guys at the same like time announced that they're coming back next year. So I was thinking like, well, they must have had like a team meeting. These guys would all be like juniors or whatever coming back. They could have went pro early. No, they're all seniors and graduates already. Like the COVID year already gave them an extra year. So now they're going to have one extra year. And I was like, well, no wonder Michigan doesn't have that many guys recruited for this year. I don't even know how many roster openings they're going to have if everyone comes back from a playoff team. Like that would be insane. Like I told you, like Blake Corum might come back. He was hurt. The NFL, for whatever reason, thinks he's undersized. So like if you have a chance to make more in NIL, which he's been doing, he donates some of his NILs to buy turkeys every Thanksgiving. So we don't know how much he's making, right? He was just in the Heisman. He should have been. I didn't even talk about Heisman snubs on this show. We'll do it. When's the Heisman? Is it this weekend?
Yeah.
We'll talk about it next week. But like him and Hooker should have 100% been invited. I know they got hurt, but like do them some justice, right? They were clearly the front runners, and they got hurt the same weekend, I think. It was the weekend before Thanksgiving, wasn't it?
Or pretty close to it.
So they missed one game. I think Blake played 11. I think Hooker played 11. So you missed one game, really? And then the conference championships would not everyone played in. So why does that matter, right? They invited Stroud. He didn't play in the conference championship. So I think inviting the guys for their body of work, and it's funny because like the other running backs that have won it, Corum has like the same stats that they have, and they played a full season. So like, how would you not even, I'm not saying to give him the Heisman. I'm saying don't snub a guy for no reason because it's turning into just a quarterback award and it's a joke. So that's all I have.
I agree.
Does he have anything else for the end of the show?
Nope, that's it.
All right. Well, thanks for listening. Go to southboundsports.com. Make sure you subscribe. Tell your friends. If you want the live stream with the extra version, the extended live stream, like behind the scenes stuff, you can go to patreon.com/southboundsports. We stream it there. And thanks for listening. We will see you next week.